As a man who has been through multiple failed relationships and has now found himself in a relationship that is thriving, loving, connected, and all of the things that you actually want in a relationship, that all of my past relationships that failed and the relationship that I'm in now were entirely dependent on one thing. And that's who I was as a man and who I am as a man. And people complain all the time that, oh, I'm dating a narcissist. I'm dating someone who takes advantage of me or, doesn't really care about me and takes me for granted and all these things. And those might be true. And I'm not trying to diminish the fact that you might be in a toxic relationship with someone who doesn't fully appreciate you. But what I do want to say is I want to put the power back in your court and say that you are in that relationship because of the person that you are. You've allowed that person into your life. You've allowed the relationship to become what it is. And you have the power to either leave or change it. And I want to help you understand the archetypes and the character traits that have allowed you to fall into the situation that you're in so that you can avoid it and prevent it from happening in the future or repair the relationship that you're in now. So really what I want to run you through are the three archetypes of men in relationships. And I mean, this can still apply to women, don't get me wrong. So if you're a woman, you can continue to watch, you will still get value from this. But there are really three archetypes. And the reason that we have the masculine and feminine symbols here is because these are going to serve as the foundation for these different archetypes. Because here's the thing, when we go through our early years in life from ages from birth up until maybe the age of 2, 3, and we're starting to get a grip of our identity and our sense of self, we are 100% of who we are. We haven't really injected too many of society's and our parents' values and these beliefs about who we should be. And so we haven't really repressed that much of ourselves. But as we get a bit older, as we start to develop, this awareness of other people's perceptions of us and other people's values and other people's beliefs, we start to inject them into our own psyche and repress the parts of ourselves that don't align with society and the people around us. For example, men who grow up in fatherless homes tend to unconsciously repress their masculinity because all they're exposed to is their mother's femininity. And as a result of that, it makes them believe that that's the man they need to be. They need to be feminine, nurturing, loving, and they don't really acknowledge the masculine parts of themselves because, again, it wasn't really taught to them. Now, is that to say that feminine traits in a man is bad? No, and I'm going to explain why this is important to understand. What I am trying to say is that when men fully repress their masculinity, which would be in this camp up here, which I'll tell you about in a second, it leads to a diminishing of the qualities that allow them to be great partners and that will attract the feminine in their lives, which they are ultimately seeking, right? Because there has to be polarity. The positive and the positive of two sets of batteries cannot come together. You need the positive and the negative to come together. It's like trying to force two sides of the same side of a magnet together. So with that being said, these repressed parts of ourselves are known as what Carl Jung called the shadow. And so you can imagine it like this. From the ages of maybe 3 or 4 up, and once we start to realize these values and beliefs of society, we start shoving all these parts of ourselves in a bag that we carry behind us, repressed in our unconscious mind, that we forget they exist, and they start to come out in unconscious ways, and the qualities that we need from those elements of ourselves become repressed as well. And so with that foundation being set, I want to run you through how we can unbound and unrepress or resurface these repressed parts of ourselves to ultimately become the people we need to be in our relationships, for our partners and for ourselves, and for longevity in our relationships. So the first archetype here is the people pleaser. And people pleasers are the type of people who have low assertiveness, high empathy, high emotional intelligence, and they're very in touch with the other person, which is why the feminine symbol is here, because this is typically found in people who have repressed their masculinity. They've repressed their assertiveness, and as a result of that, they become very reliant on other people and doing things for other people and trying to solve other people's problems, their emotional struggles and burdens, and being in touch with those other people's emotional side to derive their self-worth from. The issue with this is that they end up attracting people who take advantage of them. These are the people who attract the narcissists, the takers, the fighters, the people who always want to bicker and belittle them. These are the people who attract that. And the interesting thing is that each of these different archetypes have a core emotion, and the core emotion of the people pleaser is fear. Everything that they do for their partners is done out of fear. It's not done out of love. It's it's not done out of the care of the other person. It's actually done because they are afraid the other person is going to leave them. And they're deathly afraid of being alone because their sense of identity and self-worth is unbound, it's unsolidified, there's no solid foundation, it's uncemented, and they rely on the other partner to derive that sense of self-worth. So again, people pleasers, highly emotional, highly emotionally in touch and intelligent, which is their upside and strength. But the issue, of course, is that they get taken advantage of by people who are more manipulative, or they just get pushed around, taken advantage of, they become resentful, and the relationship falls apart. Now, the second archetype here is the fighter. Now, you can call this many different things, the warrior, the fighter, the nitpicker, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But this is ultimately the repressed feminine and dominant masculine side, or masculine archetype. So these people have high assertiveness, high self-worth, and another interesting thing as well that I will mention is that each of these different archetypes also has a different attachment style. So if you don't understand attachment style is how we essentially form our bonds and attachments with other people. So this people-pleasing side, these are the anxious types. So they're very anxious about their partner leaving them, again, as I mentioned. Whereas this side is actually quite avoidant. So they don't become as emotionally close to their partners as they need to give the other partner the closeness and the intimacy that they need. So again, high assertiveness, high self-worth, and as a result of that, they don't see the relationships they're in as essential. They're quite confident that they could just go off and leave and find someone else. And these are the people that attract the people pleasers. So these two types tend to find themselves in relationships with one another. Whether this is the man and this is the woman, or this is the man and this is the woman, doesn't matter. Again, masculine and feminine is not gendered. These are elements that every man and woman has in themselves. So on this side, the actual core emotion, in fact, let me use red here, of this archetype is anger. Because these are the people who have that masculine drive to attack life. And that doesn't mean that they're going to physically attack their partners, but they do tend to become more easily agitated. These are the guys who snap quite easily. The guys who have been stressed at work all day, come home, their wife says something that they don't like, and then they just lose their fucking shit. These are the guys in that camp. And again, they do this because they feel like deep down, they don't feel like they need their partner. They feel like they've got their sense of self-worth covered, even though that might just be a facade. They might not actually have the high sense of self-worth that they believe that they do. But it's, again, a perception in their minds that they're okay, they don't need anyone else. And again, just so that we can get this down here, these are the anxious. I'll just do this. These are the avoidant. And so, again, these types of people attract grandiose narcissists. They attract the people pleasers. They attract the givers. And it's, again, these two that tend to find themselves together. Now, there is the third archetype, and I want to make this very clear. This is what you were shooting for. No matter how you try to balance these two and how much you try and live in the relationship with this archetype still present in your psyche and in your sense of self, you're not going to be able to make it work because this person's always going to cater to the needs of this person. This person's not going to respect this person. They're going to have bickering fights, and eventually it's going to fall apart because the resentment's going to build too much. Both parties have to strive for this third archetype, which is what I would call the integrated lover or the king lover or the queen lover, whatever you want to call it. And the reason this is so important is that this is the integrated archetype, where you have integrated the empathy and the emotional intelligence of the feminine side, but you've also integrated the assertiveness and the ability to have strong boundaries and a high and strong sense of self-worth that is ungrounded in the relationship, but is independently grounded in your own sense of self and identity. Again, if we're looking at the core emotions, I'll do this in green to try and color code this a bit. This would be love. And their attachment style would be secure. I'll probably do another video on attachment styles. I've done one already, which I can link if you want. I'll try and link it here somewhere. But you have to understand that unless both parties are focused on the other person and themselves equally, so they're not only just focused entirely on the other person, they're not focused entirely on themselves, but they're focused on both themselves and the other partner, As long as they're operating from a place of love, not a place of fear, not a place of anger or frustration, or a state of trying to take, as long as they are securely attached with each other, they're not anxiously attached and trying to always cling to the other person for their sense of self and self-worth. They're not avoidant in the sense that they try and keep this level of closeness that they have with their partner at a distance so that they don't become too emotionally attached, and they can be secure where they're not overly concerned about their partner, but they are able to securely and confidently and ultimately just come together in a synergistic, loving, compassionate, and just overall grounded relationship. Unless they're able to do all of that, they're going to struggle, and the relationship is going to find itself becoming toxic, or it's going to fail in one way or another. And ultimately, we don't want that to happen, because life is about building these relationships with other people, building a family, building just deep connections, whether with friends, but most importantly with your partner that you're going to marry and love, and that you should be with until the day you die, given that you can learn the skills to maintain the relationship. Again, that is what I believe to be one of the core purposes of life. I'm not saying it's the core purpose alone, but one of the sole purposes of our existence. And so, yeah, that really touches on all the different archetypes and ultimately what you should aim for. If it was valuable, don't forget to subscribe. I'll leave another video here, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye.